Hey everybody, welcome to today's Facebook Live. I'm doing it a bit early because I am very excited. We have our first authors meeting today at 2:30 for Mom Magic. So if you haven't joined yet and you want to, hit me up. It's going to be really great. I am so excited. But I wanted to make sure I popped in here today because today's topic is one I'm very passionate about. And it's also what today's podcast episode is about. So today we're going to talk about the fact that I don't believe that failure is real, right? And call me crazy. That's okay. I'm used to it. I like my brand of crazy, but I believe that failure is a word that's used by people who are made uncomfortable by the unsuccessful efforts of others who are trying to do something big, or who are trying to do something new. I don't like the word. I have experienced my own tries and unsuccesses. And I think that when we label something a failure, we essentially announce to ourselves that there's no other option, there's nothing to try, or there's nothing we're willing to try. And when we use the word and say that someone or something is a failure as a descriptive word, then what we're saying is there's something wrong with their willingness to keep trying, right? Oftentimes you'll hear people referred to as failures because they try new things all the time and it doesn't go right the first time, right? And that's a fact of life, right? Every time you try something new, it will likely not go right the first time. And when we throw around words like failure as descriptions or call, ourselves that, we essentially discourage people from trying new things, and we reinforce that fear of judgment that stops us from, taking big leaps and going all in on our goals, because we're afraid of being labeled failures. So why do I feel like I am an expert on this subject? Let me tell you. Okay, so before I became a mortgage agent and a mompreneur coach, I worked with my family. We owned a food manufacturing business and I was in charge. I ran it. It was a great business. We did amazing things in the 6 years that we ran it. We went from 200,000 in sales to 2.5 million in sales. We secured large national contracts. We built plants. We did great things. And then, whether it's, I can tell you the mistakes I think I made that led to the outcome. But in the end, I came to work one day to clean up for some angel investors that were coming in that week. And the landlord was there changing the locks, and my business was essentially forced into bankruptcy. Did I see it coming? Probably. Was I devastated? Absolutely. Do I refer to myself as a failure? No, not at all. And that's the thing. When we don't succeed at something, we can either call it a failure or we can learn the lesson. And I get that it's cliche. I get that, failure is just a stepping stone to success. All that stuff sounds like kitschy words that people throw around when people are having a hard time. But I've lived it and I believe it to be true. If I had labeled myself a failure at business, I would have stopped. I probably would have, well, what I did is, I was feeling pretty bad. So I went and got a 9-to-5 job working for someone else. Sorry, this is hurting my head. I collected a paycheck for all of a year. I ugly cried. I wallowed. I did all the things, right? I had to go through business bankruptcy. It was not, something I would suggest for a good time. But I didn't stay there. And if I had labeled myself as a failure because I did not succeed at my first entrepreneurial venture, I would have stayed there. I would have stayed in a 9 to 5 because I, as a failure, am not able to succeed at business. So why try? But that's not what I did, right? I did the grieving and the stuff I had to do. And then I grew and I said, okay, it didn't work. Why didn't it work? And I looked back and I said, okay, what decisions did I make that went wrong? And it takes time to get there, right? Because I mean, at first you blame, right? It's your fault that I did this. It's your fault that this happened. But then ultimately there's power in taking responsibility. And so I did that. And I said, okay, what decisions did I make that weren't great? Well, I made some pretty big decisions the year before it went, that happened, which also happened to be the year after my father passed away. And I probably shouldn't have been making big decisions in the headspace of grief, but I did. That's what I had to do. And I also felt overwhelmed, didn't feel up to the challenge. I started labeling myself a failure months before the business went bankrupt. And that's the problem, is I gave up, right? Because once I called myself a failure and said this business is a failure, I stopped looking for solutions. I stopped believing that if I kept trying or I could try again. That's not to say that you have to keep trying again. And here's the key. Everybody loves to carry on about how, don't quit, winners never quit and all that jazz. But if you are no longer interested or passionate about something and you feel like your life should be going in another direction, it is perfectly acceptable, in fact, encouraged to stop, to essentially quit and choose again, right? You don't have to stick with something just because you started it. And that's something so many of us have had drilled into our head, that we have to keep going. We have to do things once we've started, even if it's making us miserable. And truth be told, I was no longer happy running that business. I felt out of my league. I wasn't passionate about, the product. I was passionate about business, but I felt a need for something that had a positive impact on the world, where I could be helping people and making the world a better place. And I didn't feel like I was getting that there. And so instead of choosing again, I kept slogging through it because I didn't want to disappoint people and I didn't want to upset anybody. And oh my gosh, who's going to do it instead of me? Because of course I'm a martyr syndrome and I need only me. But I should have just told everybody I wasn't, having the time of my life and that I wanted to choose again. And maybe we could have found a better solution. So long story short, I didn't label myself a failure because if I had, I would have quit at business, right? Instead, I said, well, that happened and I learned a lot from the experience. I even wrote a book about it that I self-published on Amazon because I thought other people could gain insights from my experience. And then I moved on and I took the knowledge with me and did other things. And that's why I'm here today. So if we remove failure, the word failure from our vocabulary, we stop labeling people with it, we stop labeling ourselves with it, we stop worrying about it and stressing about it, it frees us up to try, right? And when we try, we open up a world of opportunities. Because every time we try, whether we're worried about the succeeding or failing or not, every time we try, we get ourselves one step closer to something. And we might not even know what that something is. I mean, ultimately, the outcome could be so different from what we thought when we first set out to try, but it's magnificent. But if we're afraid of failing because we don't want to be labeled a failure, or we tell ourselves we're a failure, we never try. So the moral of this story is remove the word failure from your vocabulary, right? Let's not tell our kids that they fail if they don't get a good mark. Let's not tell ourselves we fail if we don't get it right the first time. Let's not tell anybody they're failing or they're a failure. Let's just say, hey, great try. What did we learn? Let's try again, right? Because if we take away the stigma around failing, we allow ourselves to try new things, to experience new things, to grow and to learn. And that's what we need. Imagine if everybody wasn't afraid of failing. Imagine how many new products and services and thought processes and theories there would be out there, right? So just for a second today, ask yourself, what would I do if I wasn't afraid of failing? And see what comes up, because it could be magnificent. So if you want to hear more about my thoughts on removing failure from your vocabulary, please check out today's podcast episode. You can find it on Spotify or Apple, and usually on my Facebook pages, and I share the links here. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I can't wait to talk to y'all again tomorrow. I'm excited. I'm going to go to my meeting here, meet with the mompreneurs in the book. And as always, remember, the woman you see when you look in the mirror is exactly what a successful entrepreneur looks like. Bye.